welcome back to our news bulletin. 24 people have been killed and 68 others wounded in a suicide blast at a funeral in Afghanistan's Nangarhar province. Nangarhar governor spokesperson says several wounded are in critical condition. Meanwhile, in Kabul, gunmen stormed a hospital, killing 16 people and wounding several others. The Interior Ministry says security forces have evacuated over 80 people from the hospital and have killed one assailant. The Taliban have denied responsibility for both attacks. Pakistan has strongly condemned the attacks in the war-torn country. In a statement, the Foreign Office said Pakistan condemns terrorism in all its forms and manifestations and will continue its support for peace in Afghanistan. In Pakistan, the death toll from the novel coronavirus has climbed to 724 after another 18 people succumbed to the disease. The Health Ministry has recorded more than 32,000 confirmed cases, while over 8,500 people have recovered. Meanwhile, Pakistan and the UN have announced an emergency cash assistance initiative for refugees in the wake of the COVID-19 outbreak. Under the initiative, 36,000 families would be given rupees 12,000 each to meet their urgent needs.
So when the COVID-19 pandemic was coming clearly to Pakistan, as we saw that in the middle of March, we realized that we had to also contribute to the government's response. Our first thought was, as always has been the 40 years here, that refugees have always been included in the government's response. So we appreciated that. So we felt it was time also for the COVID response to meet with the Saffron Minister, to meet with the health and meet with other officials, including NDMA, to see what we could do.
In other news, China has reassured Pakistan of its continued support in the fight against COVID-19 pandemic. This was said by Chinese Ambassador Zhao Jing, who called on Pakistan's Army Chief General Javed Bajwa in Rawalpindi. The military's media wing said matters of mutual interest, including regional security issues, were also discussed during the meeting. General Bajwa expressed gratitude for China's support related to medical supplies and the visit of Chinese medical experts to help Pakistan. The visiting dignitary reiterated Beijing's resolve to support Pakistan at all forums. In March, China sent a plane loaded with medical personnel and supplies to help Pakistan fight the spread of the novel coronavirus. 176 more people have died in Spain from the new coronavirus on the last day, with the tally at 26,920. Earlier, the United States reported 830 new fatalities in a day, pushing the country's overall total to more than 80,000. The global death toll has crossed 287,000 with over 4.2 million infections. More in this report.
In many countries, the number of deaths and new cases have started to fall. However, concerns persist over a second spike in the absence of a cure. The death toll in the U.S. has overtaken any fatalities from the seasonal flu going back to 1967 and during the first 11 years of the AIDS epidemic. But new cases are now declining in New Jersey and New York, the epicenter of the COVID-19 in the country. President Donald Trump insists his administration's response to the virus has been the best in the world.
In the span of just a few short months, we've developed a testing capacity unmatched and unrivaled anywhere in the world. And it's not even close. This is a core element of our plan to safely and gradually reopen America. And we're opening and we're starting, and there's enthusiasm like I haven't seen in a long time.
France has begun to lift its lockdowns with millions back to work after 8 weeks of restrictions. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson says the country will need to think about how its economy can adapt if a vaccine for COVID-19 does not emerge quickly. Johnson also laid out a cautious plan to get Britain back to work.
People should stay alert by working from home if you can, limiting contact with other people, keeping distance if you go out, 2 meters apart where possible, washing your hands regularly, wearing a face covering when you're in enclosed spaces and where it's difficult to be socially distant.
Meanwhile, in South Korea, 101 people have now tested positive for the coronavirus after a cluster outbreak at clubs in Seoul.
In Russia, 5 coronavirus patients have been killed and about 150 evacuated after a fire erupted in a St. Petersburg hospital. In a statement, the Russian Emergency Ministry said the fire broke out in the hospital's intensive care unit. It said the blaze was caused by a ventilator malfunction, but some ministry officials said the fire was caused by overloaded ventilators. Meanwhile, President Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov said he tested positive for the coronavirus and is in quarantine. The number of coronavirus cases in Russia has surged past 232,000, becoming the second highest in the world after the US. In occupied Kashmir, students and politicians have condemned Indian Supreme Court's refusal to lift internet ban from the valley. Earlier, rejecting the petitions, Indian top court asked New Delhi to constitute a special committee over the issue. Talking to media, several students said absence of internet has devastated their online education. They said high-speed internet is need of the hour to help the beleaguered education sector in the valley. Local politicians say the world is heavily relying on the internet amid COVID-19 pandemic, but Kashmiris are being denied it. They said internet ban is impeding the work-from-home regimen of professionals, including doctors. The valley has been under communication blackout for 282 days. Continuing communal policies, India's ruling party lawmaker says members of the Tablighi Jamaat should be treated as terrorists. Since the outbreak of COVID-19, government and media have been accusing Muslims of spreading the virus in the country. Bharatiya Janata Party leader Ajay Nishad said in madrasas, children are taught only about fundamentalism. Nishad alleged his constituency had no coronavirus case before members of the Muslim organization reached there. He said minorities, especially Muslims, have made the situation critical in the country owing to their lack of education. The Health Ministry has reported over 2,294 deaths and more than 70,000 coronavirus cases in the country. A bipartisan legislation tabled in the U.S. House of Representatives calls for sanctions on the Russian government over alleged human rights abuses. House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairperson Eliot Engel introduced the bill, calling on Moscow to immediately release political prisoners. Engel labeled President Vladimir Putin as a cruel authoritarian and accused him of silencing civil liberties and suppressing political opposition. The proposed bill's co-sponsor, Michael McCall, said Putin has been busy hiding his many failures. U.S. President Donald Trump has ruled out renegotiating the trade deal with China. At a White House press briefing, Trump said Beijing will only want changes for its own benefit. The Phase 1 trade deal reached in January ended a standoff between Washington and Beijing. The agreement ended potential tariffs on around $155 billion worth of Chinese imports. In exchange, China pledged to spend at least $200 billion more on American goods and services than it did in 2017 over a two-year period. Trump said it was up to Beijing to fulfill their end of the bargain.
China's been taking advantage of the United States for many, many years, for decades, because we had people at this position right here where I'm standing, sitting right in that office, the Oval Office, that allowed that to happen. No, I'm not interested in that. Let's see if they live up to the deal that they signed.
Trump has threatened to withdraw from the agreement if China fails to live up to its commitments. Moving on from the Middle East, Yemen says it will confront an armed rebellion by separatists in the south as a group has refused to de-escalate the situation. In a statement, Foreign Minister Mohammad al-Hadami said the rebels rejected the government's offer to defuse the tensions. He said the army will do everything necessary to preserve the state, its institutions, and the safety of its citizens. Hadami urged the group to implement the Riyadh Pact, a power-sharing deal brokered in November. The Southern Transitional Council declared self-rule in Aden and nearby areas, threatening to renew the conflict with the government. Earlier, heavy fighting broke out between the government troops and separatists in southern Yemen. Turkish and Russian troops have conducted their 10th joint patrol in Syria's northwestern province of Idlib. The patrol is being conducted in line with the Moscow agreement. In a tweet, the Turkish Defense Ministry said the joint patrol was carried out by air and land vehicles. The patrol covered the M4 highway, which connects the cities of Aleppo and Latakia. The two countries agreed on a protocol which urged parties to cease all military actions along the line of contact in the Idlib de-escalation zone. Idlib has long been under siege by Assad regime forces and its allies, and previous ceasefires for the region were affected by violations. Turkey says it has killed 3 militants of the Kurdistan Workers' Party in northern Syria. The Defense Ministry says the fighters were killed during Operation Peace Spring. The ministry said it will not stop the operations against militants in the region. Meanwhile, the ministry said Turkish and Russian forces conducted the 10th joint patrol on a key highway in Syria's northwestern border. It said troops from the two countries carried out land and aerial inspections in Idlib. The patrolling is a part of an agreement brokered between Turkey and Russia on March 5th in Moscow. We're taking a short break, but stay tuned for more news. Welcome back. The UN Agency for Children has called on Israel to release imprisoned Palestinian children. In a statement, UNICEF warned that children in detention face a heightened risk of contracting COVID-19. The statement said at the end of March, Israeli authorities had 194 Palestinian minors in prisons. It said the rights of children to protection, safety, and well-being must be upheld at all times. UN agencies officials said the children are denied in-person access to their families and their lawyers. The Libyan National Army says it did not attack the Turkish embassy in Tripoli, but the Government of National Accord did. This comes after Turkey warned it will consider Khalifa Haftar's forces a legitimate target if they continue to attack its interests. LNA spokesperson Ahmad al-Mizmari admitted targeting Libya's Metega airport. He said the airport has a military operations room which is used to target LNA forces and civilians, but al-Mizmari rejected a report on the airport attack by the UN mission in Libya. He said the mission speaks on behalf of terrorist groups. Iran's Foreign Minister Javad Zarif says an Iranian scientist detained in the U.S. on groundless charges has been freed. Zarif said Sirius Asghari will return to the country if he tests negative for coronavirus. In a statement, Zarif said Iranian Foreign Ministry has been working hard to pave the way for the scientist's return. Asghari, a professor of material sciences at Sharif University of Technology, was arrested in the United States in mid-2017. He was charged with withholding information in the process of visa application, circumventing sanctions, and transferring technology to Iran. Meanwhile, the U.S. has asked Tehran to send a charter plane to take home 11 Iranian nationals being deported by Washington. In a Twitter post, Homeland Security Department official accused Iran of stalling the repatriation process. Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman says the kingdom will continue its efforts to remove Sudan from U.S. list of state sponsors of terrorism. On a phone call to the head of Sudan's Sovereign Council, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, the Crown Prince stressed Riyadh's keenness on the security and stability of Khartoum. In January, the kingdom asked the United States to remove Sudan from its list of state sponsors of terrorism. The designation prevents Khartoum from receiving debt relief and financing from the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Germany says it will spend 750 million euros on a program to develop and distribute coronavirus vaccines. Last month, Berlin authorized the first clinical trial of a coronavirus vaccine developed by BioNTech. At a briefing, Research Minister Anja Karlitzke said about €500 million are to be spent on expanding trial capacity in Germany, while 250 million is earmarked for developing production capacity. Karlitzke said as soon as the vaccine is found, production must start quickly and on a large scale. Meanwhile, in New York, research says The anti-malarial drug hydroxychloroquine has shown mixed results against the coronavirus in early studies. But combining the drug with the dietary supplement zinc sulfate can create a more effective treatment. The world's tallest building, the BURJ Khalifa, has become a glowing charity donation box to buy food for residents of the United Arab Emirates suffering financial hardships in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. Each of the tower's 1.2 million lights can be bought for $2.7 to buy one meal. People can bid to claim the light at the very top. As the region's tourism and business hub with the world's busiest international airport, Dubai's economy has been hit hard by the coronavirus pandemic. Many people have lost their jobs or had their incomes reduced. The donation box has raised funds for more than 1.2 million meals so far. The fundraising drive is part of a campaign to fund 10 million meals for low-income families during the Islamic holy month of Ramadan. The UAE has recorded 18,878 cases of infection with COVID-19 and 201 deaths, the second highest death toll after Saudi Arabia of the 6 Gulf states. Oxfam International says world efforts for a global ceasefire to contain COVID-19 have been a catastrophic failure. In a report, the NGO said fighting continues in many conflict-torn countries despite a UN appeal in March. The report said the problem was compounded by a diplomatic failure at the UN Security Council and years of weak investment in peace-building efforts. It said many countries remain active participants of the war machinery, conducting operations, selling arms, and supporting third parties. On May 8, the US refused to vote on a UN resolution for a global ceasefire, which Oxfam said was the latest failure of the Council. The report said that only a halt in violence will allow an effective response to the new coronavirus. The UN says urgency to act for sustainable development is now greater than ever as coronavirus pandemic continues. This comes as the UN held a policy discussion about how to get back on track towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. President of the Economic and Social Council, Mona Juul, said global poverty is slipping back to the levels last seen 30 years ago. She said the pandemic has put incomprehensible setbacks to hard-won developmental gains. Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed said lives and livelihoods everywhere depend on the UN's help. Meanwhile, UNICEF has appealed for $1.6 billion for children impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Mexico's president has ordered the armed forces to tackle security on the streets for another 4 years. This is an extension of a policy he had previously criticized as the government struggles to curb runaway violence. President Andrés Manuel López Obrador outlined the policy extension in a notice published in the official Gazette. The notice ordered the armed forces to assist the National Guard in public security matters. Obrador won office in 2018, vowing to adopt a more conciliatory security strategy focused on the root causes of crime. But the violence has ground during his first year and half in charge, with a record 34,582 people murdered in 2019. The order will last until March 2024, until almost the end of Obrador's presidency. Venezuelan opposition leader Juan Guaido has accepted the resignation of his Miami-based advisor, Juan Randon. Randon acknowledged discussions with the U.S. security firm to topple President Nicolas Maduro. Guaido has denied any involvement in the bungled invasion. In a statement, Guaido thanked Randon and another exiled lawmaker, Sergio Vergara, who also resigned from the opposition's Crisis Strategy Commission. He appreciated their dedication and commitment to Venezuela. Randon has said he cut ties with the firm's chief executive, Jordan Guaidó, in November, while Vergara said he had not been aware of the so-called Operation Gideon. Meanwhile, Venezuela's military says it has arrested 8 more people in connection with the failed invasion. China has successfully launched 2 satellites into orbit for its space-based Internet of Things project. State media reported the satellites were sent on a Kuaizhou-1A rocket from a launch center in Jiquan. These 2 are the first of 80 low-orbit communication satellites that are part of the Yingyun engineering project. The satellites will be used to test applications in the fields of environmental monitoring, meteorological forecasting, and marine transport communication. For our top business story, Wall Street stocks have edged higher as investors assessed the latest attempts to reopen the economy during the coronavirus pandemic. The Nasdaq Composite Index started trading, riding a 6-season winning streak. The shares of Apple soared 1% as tech stocks extended their lead. The S&P 500 index slipped in early choppy trading but lifted cautiously, assessing fears of reopening the economy. The Dow Jones Industrial Average also traded marginally higher. Oil prices rose over Saudi Arabia's commitment to deepening production cuts in June to help drain the glut in the global market. U.S. President Donald Trump says Tesla should be able to restart a company factory in California in defiance of local coronavirus containment efforts. In a tweet, the U.S. president said California should let Tesla open the plant. On Monday, Tesla CEO Elon Musk announced the factory in the city of Fremont would be restarting production. In a message to the authorities, Musk said he should be the first one to be arrested if the state plans to arrest any worker. The restart defied orders from the Public Health Department, which deemed the factory a non-essential business. The department said the factory cannot function under current restrictions in place to prevent the spread of COVID-19. The scuffle comes as states and cities around the United States are experimenting with ways to safely reopen their economies. Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.news.